The words stung like a slap across the face. "You're too old for this." Margaret, my daughter-in-law, Claire, had said, her voice clipped and cold, as if she were dismissing a child. We were in the kitchen of my son's house, the air heavy with the scent of roasted chicken and the tension of unspoken grievances. The family was planning a grand vacation or road trip across the country. National parks, campfires, the works. My grandkids, Ellie and Max, were buzzing with excitement, their chatter filling the room with life. I'd been invited, or so I thought, until Claire's words cut through the warmth like a winter gust. "Too old," I echoed, my voice quieter than I intended, betraying the tremor of hurt I felt. At 70, I wasn't the spry woman who'd once chased toddlers or hiked mountain trails, but I was far from frail. My hands, lined with decades of stories, still needed dough for Sunday dinners. My heart still raced when I saw my grandchildren's faces light up. But Claire's eyes were resolute, her arms crossed as she stood by the counter, her perfectly manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm. "It's a long trip, Margaret. Rough roads, late nights. You'd slow us down," she said, softening her tone as if that would dull the blade. My son, David, stood silently by the fridge, avoiding my gaze. His silence hurt more than her words. I'd raised him to stand up for what was right, but there he was, letting his wife dictate my place in their lives. I swallowed the lump in my throat and forced a smile. "I understand," I said, though I didn't. "Not really." I gathered my purse, kissed Ellie and Max on their foreheads, and left without another word. The drive home was a blur, the radio's static hum matching the chaos in my mind. "Too old." The phrase echoed, each repetition a jab at my pride. I'd spent my life building a family, sacrificing dreams to give David a good life. And now I was being sidelined like an outdated piece of furniture. Back in my small, tidy apartment, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the framed photo of my late husband, George. His warm brown eyes seemed to watch me, as they always had when I faced a crossroads. "What do I do, George?" I whispered. He'd been gone 10 years, but I still talked to him when the world felt too heavy. No answer came, but my gaze drifted to a stack of papers on the counter, the inheritance documents. George and I had saved diligently, not for ourselves, but for David and the grandkids. It was meant to be their future, a safety net. But as I sat there, Claire's words burning in my chest, a spark of defiance ignited. Why should I wait to be useful? Why should I let my life be defined by someone else's limits? I pulled my laptop closer, my fingers trembling with a mix of anger and exhilaration. I typed "luxury cruises for seniors" into the search bar. The screen lit up with images of sparkling oceans, grand ships, and destinations I'd only dreamed of: Alaska, the Mediterranean, the Caribbean. My heart pounded. This was my money, my life. If I was too old for their trip, I'd make my own. By midnight, I'd booked a 3-month world cruise, departing in 2 weeks. It was extravagant, the kind of thing George would have called reckless, but it felt right. The cost: a significant chunk of the inheritance I'd planned to leave David and Claire. I didn't feel guilty, not yet. Instead, I felt alive, like I'd reclaimed a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. The next morning, I called David. "I'm going on a cruise," I announced, my voice steady. There was a long pause on the other end. "A cruise? Mom, that's sudden," he said, his tone laced with confusion. I could hear Claire in the background, murmuring something sharp. "I deserve it," I replied simply. "I'll send the kids postcards from every port." I hung up before he could argue, my heart racing with a thrill I hadn't felt in years. I wasn't just Margaret, the widowed grandmother pushed to the sidelines. I was Margaret, the woman who was about to see the world. Over the next 2 weeks, I prepared with a fervor I hadn't known since my youth. I bought new clothes, bright scarves, comfortable yet stylish shoes, and a pair of sunglasses that made me feel like a movie star. I sorted through old photos, tucking a few of George into my suitcase for company. The grandkids came over one afternoon, their eyes wide as I showed them the cruise itinerary on my laptop. Ellie, 8 and curious, traced her finger over the map, asking about glaciers and pyramids. Max, 6 and full of energy, wanted to know if I'd see pirates. I laughed, promising to tell them everything when I returned. Claire, however, was less enthusiastic. She cornered me in the hallway before I left. "This is irresponsible, Margaret," she said, her voice low but sharp. "That money was for the kids' future." "It's my money, Claire," I replied, meeting her gaze. "And I'm not done living yet." For the first time, she looked uncertain, her confidence faltering. I walked away, my suitcase rolling behind me, feeling lighter than I had in years. The day of departure arrived, and I stood at the port, the massive cruise ship looming before me like a promise. The air smelled of salt and possibility. Other passengers, many around my age, bustled around, their faces lit with anticipation. I adjusted my scarf, took a deep breath, and stepped aboard. This was my adventure, my rebellion against being too old. And as the ship's horn blared, signaling the start of the journey, I felt George's smile in my heart, urging me forward. The ship, the Odyssey Star, was a floating city, all gleaming glass and polished wood, with chandeliers that sparkled like stars in the grand atrium. My cabin was modest but cozy, with a small balcony overlooking the endless ocean. As I unpacked, hanging my scarves and arranging George's photos on the nightstand, I felt a strange mix of exhilaration and nervousness. I was alone, truly alone, for the first time in decades. No family to cook for, no obligations to meet. Just me, the sea, and the unknown. The first few days were a whirlwind of new experiences. I joined a morning yoga class on the deck, my joints creaking but my spirits soaring as the instructor, a kind woman named Lila, guided us through gentle stretches. I met Harold, a retired professor with a penchant for storytelling, who regaled me with tales of his travels over dinner. There was also Sophia, a lively widow from Italy, who insisted I try her favorite cocktail, a Bellini, at the ship's lounge. We laughed until midnight, her infectious energy reminding me of the friends I'd lost touch with over the years. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. At night, when the ship was quiet and the stars blanketed the sky, doubts crept in. Had I been too impulsive? Was Claire right? Was I being selfish? I'd catch myself staring at George's photo, wishing I could hear his voice. Am I doing the right thing? I'd whisper, but the only answer was the gentle lapping of waves against the hull. The first port of call was Juneau, Alaska. The air was crisp, the mountains towering like ancient guardians. I signed up for a glacier hike, something I hadn't done since my 30s. The guide, a young man named Ethan, checked my gear with a skeptical glance. "You sure you're up for this, ma'am?" he asked. I smiled, remembering Claire's words, and said, "Try me." The hike was grueling, my legs burning with each step, but the sight of the Mendenhall Glacier, its icy blue expanse, shimmering under the sun, was worth every ache. I stood at the edge, breathless, feeling small yet invincible. A fellow hiker, a woman in her 60s named Diane, snapped a photo of me, my silver hair wild in the wind, my face alight with triumph. "You look like you belong here," she said. I kept that photo, tucking it into my journal, a reminder that I was more than too old. Back on the ship, I wrote postcards to Ellie and Max, describing the glacier's beauty and promising to bring them souvenirs. I avoided mentioning Claire or David, not wanting to taint the joy of the moment. But a call from David, When the ship had service, brought reality crashing back. "Mom, Claire's upset," he said, his voice strained. "She thinks you're throwing away our future." "Our future?" I repeated, my grip tightening on the phone. "David, I've spent my life building your future. This is for me." He sighed, and I could picture him rubbing his temples, caught between his wife and his mother. "Just be careful, okay?" he said finally. I promised I would, but as I hung up, I felt a pang of guilt. Was I punishing them, or was I finally claiming my own happiness? The guilt didn't last long. The next stop was Vancouver, where I wandered through vibrant markets, tasting fresh salmon and buying a carved wooden bear for Max. I joined a group excursion to a botanical garden, where I met Raj, a retired doctor from India who shared my love of roses. We talked for hours, our conversation flowing from gardening to grief lost his wife, too. There was a quiet understanding between us, a recognition of life's fragility and its beauty. By the time we reached Hawaii, I felt like a new woman. I wore my brightest scarf, danced at the ship's luau night, and even tried surfing laughably bad, but I laughed harder than I had in years. Sophia cheered me on, her Bellini raised high, while Harold narrated my wipeouts like a sports commentator. I was building a new family, not of blood, but of shared moments and mutual respect. Yet, as the ship sailed toward Asia, I couldn't shake the feeling that this journey was about more than adventure. It was about proving something to Claire, to David, to myself. I wasn't just running from their rejection. I was running toward a version of myself I'd buried under years of duty and sacrifice. And with each new port, each new friend, I felt her coming back to life. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before the ship, a vast mirror reflecting my thoughts. I'd been at sea for a month now, and the rhythm of the crew's mornings on the deck, afternoons exploring ports, evenings filled with laughter and music had become my new normal. But as we approached Japan, a new layer of introspection settled over me. This wasn't just about proving I wasn't too old. It was about rediscovering who I was outside the roles of mother, grandmother, and widow. In Tokyo, I wandered through cherry blossom gardens, their delicate pink petals a stark contrast to the city's neon pulse. I joined a tea ceremony, guided by a woman named Aiko, whose gentle hands and serene smile reminded me of my own mother. As we sipped matcha, she spoke of wabi-sabi, the beauty of imperfection, of embracing life's fleeting moments. Her words struck a chord. For years, I'd strived for perfection, perfect meals, perfect home, perfect sacrifices for my family. But maybe it was time to embrace my own imperfections, my own desires. I wrote in my journal that night, the ship rocking gently, I'm not just Margaret, the woman who raised David or loved George. I'm Margaret, who loves cherry blossoms, who can still learn, who can still dream. The realization felt like a key turning in a long-locked door. The next stop, Hong Kong, was a sensory overload, skyscrapers piercing the clouds, markets buzzing with life, the air thick with the scent of dumplings and incense. I joined Sophia and Raj for a dim sum brunch, where we shared stories of our youth. Sophia's tales of dancing in Rome's piazzas were wild and vivid, while Raj spoke of sneaking into medical school lectures as a teenager, hungry for knowledge. I found myself opening up, telling them about the art classes I'd taken in my 20s, before life's demands pulled me away. You should paint again, Raj said, his eyes kind but firm. I laughed it off, but the idea lingered. Back on the ship, I signed up for an art workshop. The instructor, a wiry man named Leo, handed me a brush and a canvas. My first strokes were hesitant, the colors muted, but as the hours passed, something shifted. I painted a seascape, bold blues and golds, inspired by the ocean that had become my companion. When I finished, Leo clapped me on the shoulder. You've got a spark, Margaret, he said. I beamed, feeling like a student again, eager to learn and create. But not every moment was triumphant. A video call with Ellie and Max brought a wave of homesickness. They showed me drawings they'd Medea shipped for me, with a stick figure grandma waving. "When are you coming back?" Max asked, his voice small. "I promise soon." But my heart ached. Claire's voice cut through the call, brisk and businesslike. "Time for bed. Kids." No greeting. No warmth. I ended the call quickly, my chest tight. Was I being selfish, leaving them behind for this? That night, I sat on my balcony, the stars above me and George's photo in my hands. "I miss them," I whispered, "but I'm not ready to go back." I wanted to believe this journey was worth it, that I was building something new, not just running from pain. The next morning, I joined Harold for a lecture on ancient trade routes, his passion for history reigniting my own curiosity. I started reading again, devouring books from the ship's library, my mind hungry for stories and ideas. In Singapore, I walked through gardens by the bay, the towering super trees glowing against the night sky. Sophia convinced me to try a cooking class, where we fumbled through making laksa, laughing at our mistakes. I felt young, not in body but in spirit, as if the years of routine had fallen away. Raj joined us for a night market, where I bought a silk scarf for Ellie and a toy dragon for Max. I imagined their faces when they opened them, and for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for being here. I was living, fully and fiercely, and that was a gift I could share with them, too. As we sailed toward Australia, I began to see this journey as a bridge not just between ports, but between the woman I'd been and the woman I was becoming. Claire's words had pushed me to the edge, but I'd chosen to leap. And with each new experience, I was building a life that wasn't defined by anyone else's expectations. I wasn't just surviving. I was thriving. Australia was a revelation. Sydney's harbor sparkled under a cloudless sky, the opera house gleaming like a beacon of possibility. I stood at the ship's railing as we docked, my heart swelling with a sense of freedom I hadn't known since my youth. This journey, born of hurt and defiance, had become something more a reclamation of my spirit, a refusal to be diminished. I joined a group tour to the Blue Mountains, where the eucalyptus haze painted the valleys in soft blues. Our guide, a cheerful woman named Mia, spoke of the land's ancient stories, and I felt a kinship with the rugged cliffs and endless skies. At a lookout point, I met Clara, a fellow cruiser in her 80s, who moved with a cane but spoke with the fire of a woman half her age. "Never let anyone tell you your time's up," she said, her eyes twinkling. I nodded, thinking of Claire's words, and felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected sisterhood. Back on the ship, I started writing letters, not just postcards, but real letters to Ellie and Max. I poured my heart into them, describing the kangaroos I'd seen, the Aboriginal art that moved me, the way the ocean seemed to hold all the world's secrets. I wanted them to know their grandmother wasn't just an old woman in their house, but someone with stories and dreams of her own. I didn't send them yet, saving them for when I returned, hoping they'd understand. The journey continued to New Zealand, where the fjords of Milford Sound took my breath away. I kayaked with Sophia and Raj, our paddles slicing through water so clear it mirrored the mountains above. My arms ached, but my laughter echoed across the fjord. "You're a natural, Margaret," Sophia called, her voice bright. I wasn't, but I didn't care. I was trying, living, feeling every moment. One evening, as we sailed toward Fiji, I joined a dance class on the deck. The instructor taught us a slow waltz, and Harold, ever the gentleman, offered to be my partner. We moved clumsily at first, but as the music swelled, I closed my eyes and imagined George. I could almost feel his hand in mine, guiding me as we danced at our wedding. Tears pricked my eyes, not from sadness, but from the beauty of carrying him with me. Even here, a call from David interrupted the bliss. "Mom, Claire's been talking to a lawyer," he said, his voice tight. "She says you're spending their inheritance." The words hit like a punch, but I steadied myself. "It's my money, David," I said firmly. "George and I earned it. I'm not gone yet, and I'm not sorry for living." He was quiet, then murmured an apology before hanging up. I stared at the phone, anger and hurt swirling in my chest. But as I stepped onto my balcony, the warm Pacific breeze washing over me, I let it go. This was my time, and I wouldn't let their resentment steal it. In Fiji, I walked barefoot on a beach, the sand warm between my toes. I joined a village tour, where locals welcomed us with songs and kava. I sat with a woman named Lonnie, who shared stories of her grandmother, a weaver who'd taught her to honor the past while embracing the present. I thought of Ellie and Max, of the legacy I wanted to leave, not just money, but courage, curiosity, and the belief that life doesn't end at 70. Back on the ship, I painted another seascape, this one bolder, with fiery reds and deep purples, capturing a Fijian sunset. Leo, the art instructor, hung it in the ship's gallery, and I blushed when passengers complimented it. I was no artist, but I was creating something, maybe not just paintings, but a new chapter of my life. As we sailed toward South America, I felt a shift. This journey wasn't just about escaping Claire's judgment or proving a point. It was about rediscovering joy, about building a life that honored both my past and my future. I thought of George, of the dreams we'd shared, and realized I was living them now, for both of us. And with each new horizon, I felt stronger, more certain that I was exactly where I was meant to be. South America was a tapestry of color and rhythm. In Rio de Janeiro, I stood at the feet of Christ the Redeemer, the statue's arms outstretched as if embracing the world. The city pulsed below, alive with samba and sunlight. I joined a dance class on the beach, my hips swaying awkwardly to the beat, Sophia laughing beside me. "You're a karaoke now, Margaret," she teased. I didn't know what I was, but I felt free, my silver hair catching the breeze as I moved. The ship's community had become my anchor. Harold, Sophia, Raj, and Clara were more than friends, they were my crew, each teaching me something new. Harold's stories sparked my curiosity. Sophia's zest reminded me to laugh. Raj's quiet wisdom grounded me, and Clara's resilience inspired me. We shared meals, debates, and dreams, our table a microcosm of the world we were exploring. In Buenos Aires, I tried tango, my steps tentative but determined. My partner, a local instructor named Diego, was patient, his smile warm. "It's not about perfection," he said. "It's about feeling." I thought of wabi-sabi, of Aiko's words in Japan, and let myself move with the music, flaws and all. For the first time, I didn't feel old, just alive. But the weight of home lingered. A letter arrived from David, forwarded through the cruise line. It was brief, his handwriting shaky. "Mom, I'm sorry. Claire's been hard on you, and I didn't stand up for you. I miss you. Please come home safe." I read it again and again, tears blurring the words. I wanted to call him, to tell him I forgave him, but I wasn't ready to face Claire's judgment again. Instead, I wrote back, promising to talk when I returned, and tucked his letter beside George's photo. In Chile, I hiked a trail in Patagonia, the Andes looming like ancient sentinels. My legs protested, but Clara, leaning on her cane, kept pace beside me. "We're tougher than they think," she said, and I laughed, knowing she meant more than the hike. At a lookout, I scattered a pinch of George's ashes, kept in a small vial I'd carried since his death. "You'd love this, darling," I whispered, the wind carrying my words to the peaks. The guilt I'd felt about the inheritance began to fade. This journey wasn't about taking from David or the kids, it was about giving myself permission to live. I'd saved for their future, but I deserved a present. And the stories, the strength, the joy I was finding, I'd share those with Ellie and Max. A legacy worth more than money. In Peru, I walked the ruins of Machu Picchu, my breath catching at the ancient stones. Raj joined me, his knowledge of history deepening the experience. We sat on a terrace, the clouds parting to reveal the city below. And he said, "This place reminds us we're part of something bigger." I nodded, thinking of my place in the world not just as a grandmother, but as a woman with stories to tell. Back on the ship, I painted Machu Picchu, my brushstrokes bold and free. The canvas wasn't perfect, but it was mine, a testament to this journey. Leo hung it beside my Fijian sunset, and I felt a quiet pride. I was creating, learning, living not for anyone else, but for me. As we sailed toward Europe, I began to think about home not with dread, but with clarity. I'd return changed, stronger, ready to face Claire's disapproval or David's uncertainty. I wasn't the Margaret who'd left, hurt and sidelined. I was Margaret, who'd kayaked fjords, danced samba, and painted sunsets. And that Margaret had a voice, one I'd used to set things right. The Mediterranean was a dream woven in blue and gold. In Greece, I wandered Santorini's whitewashed streets, the Aegean sparkling below. I bought a necklace for Ellie, its blue stone matching the sea, and a book of myths for Max, imagining his delight at tales of heroes. Sophia and I shared gelato, her laughter echoing as we watched the sunset paint the sky in pinks and purples. I felt like I was living in a painting, every moment a brushstroke of joy. In Italy, Rome's ancient stones told stories of resilience, much like my own. I tossed a coin into the Trevi fountain, wishing not for youth, but for courage to carry this journey's lessons home. Harold guided us through the Colosseum, his voice rich with history, and I felt a connection to the past that made my own life feel timeless. The final leg of the cruise brought us to Barcelona, where Gaudi's wild architecture mirrored the boldness I'd found within myself. I walked through Park Güell, its mosaic lizards glinting in the sun, and realized I wasn't ready for this to end. But the ship's horn signaled our return to reality, and I knew it was time to face home. On the last night, the ship hosted a gala. I wore my brightest scarf, the one Ellie had loved, and danced with Raj under a canopy of stars. "You're not the same woman who boarded this ship," he said, his eyes warm. I smiled, knowing he was right. I'd left as Margaret, the rejected grandmother, but I was returning as Margaret, the adventurer, the artist, the woman who'd claimed her life. The morning we docked, I stood at the railing, my suitcase packed with souvenirs and my heart full of stories. Clara hugged me, promising to stay in touch. Sophia slipped a note into my hand, her address scrawled with an invitation to visit. Harold gave me a book on art history, a reminder to keep painting. Raj simply smiled, saying, "Keep shining, Margaret." I boarded a plane home, my journal heavy with letters and sketches, my resolve stronger than ever. Back in my apartment, I unpacked slowly, each item a memory. The kids rushed over that evening, their hugs erasing the months apart. Ellie loved her necklace. Max pored over his book, and I told them stories of glaciers, fjords, and ancient ruins. David joined us, his eyes soft with relief. "You look different, Mom," he said. "Happier." Claire was there, too, her expression guarded. I took a deep breath and handed her a letter I'd written on the ship. It wasn't an apology, but an explanation. "I needed this, Claire. Not to hurt you, but to find myself. I hope you'll understand someday." She read it in silence, her face unreadable, but she didn't argue. It was a start. Over the next weeks, I hung my paintings, started an art class at the community center, and planned a trip with Ellie and Max to a local museum. David visited more often, our conversations deeper, his apologies heartfelt. Claire remained distant, but I didn't let it dim my light. I'd learned that my worth wasn't tied to her approval. The inheritance was smaller now, but I'd invested in something greater myself. And as I sat with my grandkids, sharing stories of my cruise, I knew I'd given them a legacy of courage, of living fully at any age. George's photo sat on my table, his smile proud. I'd honored us both, and that was enough.